Welcome back. So finally, we are at stage to implement our first microservice. So we have these three child modules from our memory multi-module project. The first one is REST fan, where we generated API stubs from our API definition. Second one contains our API definition, and the third one server will be having our real microservice implementation. I have already implemented microservice for us, and I will go over code walkthrough what I have done in this microservice. I will start with first the pom.xml because I have added some more dependencies to make our microservice work. To start with, I have added customer service API REST fan dependency, the dependency which contains the API stubs for our microservice. The second one, I have added Spring Boot Starter Web, which contain the web dependencies for our microservice. Third one I have added is Spring Boot Starter Data JPA for to access the data from our database. I've excluded Spring Boot Starter logging from Spring Boot Starter Web, as we will be using Spring Boot Starter log4j dependency for this microservice. Then I have added Spring Cloud OpenFan core dependency to enable fan client communication between our microservices. Then I have added H2 database dependency, a Lombok dependency, and some Jackson dependencies to our deserialize our request and response objects, and one Spring Boot Starter test dependency. That's all dependency I've added for our microservice. About implementation, I will start with going from first the repository. I have added customer repository here, which will extend the Spring JP repository for us. The entity will be customer entity, and the ID will be of type long. The customer entity, the name will be the customer. The ID will be the auto sequence generation strategy from the Hibernate, and the attributes it has is first name, last name, email, and phone. I will remove this user ID as we don't need user ID field here. So that's about the entity and repository class. Second, let's see the converters. I have written here two converters. One is API converter and second is entity converter. In the API converter, it's converting the API request object to the entity object. So here I have uses the converter strategy from Spring. So it's a component type where once when we gonna pass customer request, the target will be customer entity, and here just it's overriding one convert method from converter where it's converting the source entity to the target entity. And the same for entity class. Here is converter the entity into the response object, and source will be entity and the target will be customer response, and just it is converting one type to another. Also it's implementing converter class. Okay, having said that, let's now look into our main implementation. I will go to a controller class. So in case in customer controller, it's just implementing customer API interface, which we already had seen before in our REST fan project. So if I go into this, you will see the stubs which we had generated before from our API definition. So the fan client is customer service, the customer API interface where it has get customer method and post customer method. We need to override these two methods, implement these two methods to provide the business logic for us. The endpoints will be request mapping with customer ID and /customer to create customer for us, nothing else. So here I have implemented this interface. So I have implemented two methods from the interface, get customer and the post customer. So and also it's auto wiring one bean called customer service, and I'm using require args constructor annotation from the Lombok. So in case of create customer, I'm just saying optional at off from customer request, convert that customer request to our customer entity by going into this class method, bean method as a auto-wire, and just save in the database. And once save is successful, if present, get me that entity and get me the ID and set this value in our response, and finally the response will have this ID information. So here I have auto-wired 3 beans here. First is customer repository, second is API customer converter, third is entity customer converter. So that's the logic for customer, create customer. Also I'm logging, so the customer is created with email ID and the logger is of type debug. Second is the get customer. For get customer, the same, I'm using repository method from Spring. So customer repository dot find by ID, that is a customer ID, and then convert get customer entity into the customer response using convert method, which we saw before. And in case if it is not find, like the customer ID is invalid, then just throw a runtime exception, customer ID, customer with ID not found. Yeah, it should be a format. I will just fix it here. And customer ID, yeah, sure. So that's the error. But here we are currently I'm throwing runtime exception, but later in the videos I will show you how we can handle the exception between the microservices and also how we can make it more human readable format. So that's about the implementation of customer service. And then the main class, so it's a Spring Boot microservice, as you already know. So just I have added annotation as Spring Boot application, and just it will start the class having all the package scan available. So the bootstrap class I have added in the package com.sample.services. So all the packages which fall after this package will automatically be scanned by the Spring. So we don't need to mention here like package scan or something. So all the packages will automatically be scanned by the Spring. And about database, yeah, so here I'm using Flyway migration script to create database for us. That is really, it's very useful for us, because here we just just like it's creating a database for us. And if we want to change anything here, maybe we want email to be changed to email address, or phone should be changed to phone of customer something, then we can easily add one more script, and during Spring Boot initialization service the new script will be added in the will update the database for us. So that is really cool. But I will also create a video, separate video for it to explain to you even in more details. Then the application.yaml. In the application.yaml, I've started with Spring application name as customer service and some default properties from Jackson, and the same information will be there for each microservice which we're going to develop. So that's really cool, so that we always have same strategy for each microservice. Like for example, what date format we want to support in our microservice, or what time zone we want to support. Then the JPA, Spring JPA, here I'm using H2 database, and also the username password will be SAN password. And H2 console enable true means we can access the console of H2 from the UI, which I will show you in the next video. And the migration, Flyway migration. So the location to look into for this is from db.migration folder. Here db.migration, and read the migration script, and it by default starting from 8080, but also have given here server port as 8080, and some logging configuration. So it's our one definition here, application.yaml. So here I have added as root as info, because it's not a production ready configuration, so it's okay if we define here as info, and then some faint client configuration. This for faint client I will discuss in detail in a different video. So that's about the configuration for our microservice. Just one thing here I missed to explain you is about Swagger configuration. we will be using Swagger 2 for our Spring Boot microservice, and here the requirement to enable Swagger configuration is to expose a bean of docnet from Swagger and also provide some configuration. Here I have provided configuration like scan all the package under com.sample.services. Yeah, and also one more thing is here I have said not to include /error controller from the Spring, because if we don't do that, all the error controllers will be available to the Swagger UI to scan, and also will be available on our Swagger UI. That's about it. So now we can start running this microservice. So I will just go to Bootstrap and run our main method. It will take few seconds to start. We are using latest version of Spring Boot 2 here, which is there right now, and yeah, it's up, so we can access this service from our Swagger UI. Yeah, so in the Swagger UI you can see there's our controller class is there, which has two methods, create customer and post get customer for us, and also the models like what is expected from us, customer request, and what will be the response, and also the what fields are required and what fields are optional, like that. And now if I we can execute a request which I already had prepared to be executed. So yeah, to be simple, yeah, so it doesn't matter. So email is this, first name, last name, and phone. Moment I hit that is a create request, I get back an ID information, so that is the ID, and also when I pass this ID will for our get request get me customer with ID 1, I will get back all the customer information. So that's with Swagger we can access this, and also in logs maybe we will see something if I have enabled some logs. Not exactly, so debug logs are not there because root is info. Okay, doesn't matter. So we have created a customer and we also have retrieved back through Swagger UI, and this is the what we defined in our API definition before, like this endpoint will create a customer for us, and this will retrieve a customer for given customer ID for us, and also customer ID is a required field. That is all we have said in our API definition before, and in the customer response these are the required fields to be populated, and in the customer request these are the required fields which need to be populated. This all we defined in our API definition. So that's it. So here in this video we finally implemented our first microservice called customer service. We saw how we can enable Swagger UI for our microservice, and how we can use Swagger UI to execute some actions for our microservice. In the next video I will share you how we can access the database console, H2 database console for us, and how we can see our browser. That's about it. Thanks everyone for watching this, and see you in next class.